We left off on 17112. We'll entertain now any discussions on section 17112.
Mr. Chair, I have a request.
Yes, Senator.
You know, I did ask this body to bookmark a proposed amendment in 15007 or 15207. In light of some discussions I had over lunch, it was recommended that I ask a few questions, go back to this section, and then also, because we're going section by section, I'm planning to introduce the sections of my bill as floor amendments. So, would you allow me to do that?
Yes, I have you down as we're going to go back. We have others that we're going to come back to.
Okay.
So we'll continue, and then we'll come back to the others with bookmark. So you can prepare whatever amendments you have now.
Okay,
And then
so
we'll come back
even though it might affect the sections we're going to, so you're going to do, okay, that order's fine too.
Yeah, we can.
Just to mention though, that revisiting will probably include going to other sections, that's the way the
Sure.
bill was prepared.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. We're now in section 17113. Section 17. Yes, Senator Barnes.
Mr. Chair, I do apologize. I was just looking over the section, and this is for individual contribution and the limit, so that this limit would be for 1,000 for the primary and 1,000 for the general election per candidate. And if a company wanted to support an individual candidate, that would fall under a different provision, right? I'm
Senator, you want to answer that? Or Jeff?
I think my question will be on 17113, so let me go ahead and look the 17113 over. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, on the back?
Can we get a commission response to that, please?
My concern is I was under the impression that there was a federal interpretation of contributions by a business or corporation.
Yes.
And if you guys can expound on that, it would ease my mind.
The case is called Citizens United, and the Supreme Court in recent months upheld an opinion, a ruling, that allows for unions and corporations to spend their money for advertising and for whatever they wish on a candidate, but that amount of money is not considered a contribution to the candidate. And it was upheld. So that recent ruling has nothing to do with personal contributions on the part of a voter to a particular candidate.
A corporation could provide financial assistance to a candidate.
But
Could-
only through advertisements.
Yeah, through advertisements.
So
and the
Unless
definition.
there's something else that council can
Maybe
expound on.
council can,
Yeah, just so we're real clear, Citizens United only dealt with expenditures. So a company could make expenditures of its money any way it wants as to, it could make a commercial for whoever, not for the committee, but the company would be doing it itself. And it could spend $1 million to make that commercial and run it every minute, and that's legal. But the corporation still, under Guam law, could not make any donation directly to the candidate.
right.
So it strictly had to do with expenditures and not contributions.
Expenditures for a cause.
Or a person, but it's just not connected to the committee.
Okay.
And can I just
So,
add very,
Joe Cruz could spend
just,
a whole bunch of money making a commercial for whoever he or she supported without any connection to that person's committee. They don't, I mean, there's been a lot of back and forth back in the States about this, even comedians
Jeff,
dealing
but
with
it's not entirely, who they support, but it's also who they oppose.
Excuse me?
So that the company can spend company funds to go against a candidate. It's not.
I'm
it's not-
sorry,
yeah,
it can
yeah,
either
I
be
just
for
wanted
or
to
against.
add
It
to
can be a
what Senator
commercial
Barnes is
against
saying.
somebody.
Yeah, and then if they're going to be against somebody, then further in this rules and regs is
Basically what
consistent
citizen-
with the law that they would have to show that ad to the candidate, and the candidate will say, I'm so-and-so and I don't approve this message. Then they would have to disclose the treasurer and reveal themselves. Because that would be considered an attack ad against a political candidate.
Well, no.
Also to
What-
issues.
Just so Citizens United was basically a First Amendment case.
Correct.
It said that a corporation or a union is just like a person, and it can spend its money any way it wants, for somebody, against somebody, but it does have to identify itself when it does it. The disclosure requirements, if they're in the law, and of course, Citizens United was dealing with a federal statute, but it's also been applied now. They're saying it would obviously affect any local law because it can't violate the Constitution. So, but as far as contributions, they specifically said limits on contributions and whether or not a corporation can give contributions, that's left up to the state or here, the territory.
Thank you, Senator Barnes. Senator Specho, you're okay? Thank you. We're on 17-113. Any further discussion? 17-114, campaign expenditures. Section 17-115. 17-116. Section 17-117. Section 17-118, 17-119, 17-120. Senator Specho?
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about, this regarding advertising, and this is consistent with the new law that was passed. Can I get the commission's interpretation of how you would implement this section regarding third-party ads? Actually, what's going to change drastically in how we prepare our campaign commercials is now we're going to have to follow the federal standard where you would say, I'm so-and-so and I approve this message. And, that obviously is very clear. But I just wanted to be clear what the intent is behind advertisements that are designed to advance or go against a candidate. See on C here, 2C, what talks about different kinds of mediums, print or video. In a case of video advertisement of a political nature for any medium, the advertisement shall contain an audio statement that identifies the candidate and states that the candidate either has approved the communication or the communication is being circulated without the approval and authority of the candidate. And then it goes on to say, for approved communications, an unobscured full-screen view of the candidate making the statement or the candidate in voiceover, accompanied by a clearly identifiable photographic or similar image of the candidate. For non-approved communications, a statement, I mean, it really explains what needs to be done. But I think what I want to make extra clear is where that disclaimer of the candidate or disclaimer saying the candidate doesn't approve or is unaware of this message is really going to provide a greater level of transparency in those who wish to participate and influence the outcome of our elections.
You wanna-
I can try to respond to your question, Senator. I imagine it would be very difficult to enforce it, and we would review our policies and current procedures in existence to ensure that we, of course, adhere to the law. I think right now my experience has been with previous advertisements out there. If we catch it, we're able to, but there's so many that it's difficult. I'm not aware of people advertising the paper or via the media coming to the commission for permission first. I've not experienced that, no. And so it's usually when a citizen or one of us would see something, catch it, we'd review it, discuss it.
But I'm asking that when these committees come in to report to the Election Commission that they've earned the first $250, maybe if you can provide a literature that advises them of what their requirements are when they do produce these commercials.
Most definitely, of course.
Yeah, because it also says that anyone in violation of this 17120 shall be subject to a civil penalty of not more than $5,000 for each separately produced message.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. We're on 17121. Yes.
This is where the Guam Election Commission also gets involved because people will be able to submit their complaints of these violations to the Election Commission.
So, Senator, someone would have to make a complaint before they act, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you. 17122. We're now on Chapter 18. You want to just mention the EDS and I'll recognize Maria, Executive Director.
For the last two chapters of Title III, the Commission did not touch it at all, with the exception to renumber. Chapters 18 and 19 are previously are chapters 20 and 21 in the code. The first one is Chamorro Registry, and the second one is the Decolonization Registry.
Senator Gutherds.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, before we get to those sections, I have a few questions I want to ask. Because I've been listening intently for the last 3 days, and we've gone through a lot already, and that's really good. But there's a lot of questions on my mind that I'd like to get answered. And this is very important so that in the 212 election process, that hopefully we won't see the same issues arise again. But I'd like to know, does anyone on the commission know exactly how many ballots were printed for the 210 primary election and the 210 general election?
Senator, I'd have to go back and find that in the files. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay. Do you know how much ballot stock was ordered and actually received in the 210 election?
It would be reflective in the invoices from ES&S.
Okay. From what I understand, these ballots are coded for each precinct. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Senator.
So we should know, based on the coded ballots, how many were actually delivered to each precinct, correct?
Even in the ES&S invoices, it's delineated for what precincts.
Okay. Now, in reading the subcommittee findings, what I saw was that there was such a thing as a ballot plate, which is the plate used to print the ballots. Am I correct?
Yes, Senator.
And where is that produced? Is that off island? Is that produced off island?
No, the plate is produced on island.
By the printer?
That's correct, Senator.
Okay. Now, I also understand that the plate was left at the printers for many months. And we also learned from the subcommittee report that in addition, that there was ballot stock that was destroyed at the printers that apparently were not accounted for. Is that correct? That's correct. Was someone from the commission always at the printers watching that printing plate? Like every day, every hour? How did that work? From the time that plate was produced, who had custody of that plate?
Well, the commission's supposed to have custody. And earlier, I think it was, I'm not sure if it was yesterday or the day before, I did point out that, yet, that was a problem we had. I mean, plate was left there and certain ballots that were spoiled were destroyed there. I admitted that.
So in other words, there wasn't always someone from the commission keeping their eye on that plate.
You're correct.
It was not secured into the custody of the commission until it was needed to be used to print the ballots. Am I correct?
You're correct.
Okay. Now, should the plate have been secured daily
You're correct.
under the supervision of the commission?
Right.
And did you have a process to secure the plate in place that perhaps wasn't followed, or was there no process?
There was a process. There is a process. It just was not followed.
Could you tell us what that was?
The process, as based on experience, the commission has full custody once it goes to the printer. And staff is there throughout the time that it's being printed. Once the printing is completed, all the plates or any spoiled ballots are taken back to the office and handled accordingly.
Okay. But you did acknowledge, Mr. Mesa, that this process wasn't followed.
Right, and I believe that is public information.
Right. And in addition to that, the plate was not secured according to the process. And there was also unaccounted paper stock unaccounted for, and ballots unaccounted for.
Correct.
I'm trying to lead to something here. Can you just tell us really briefly, what is the procedure for printing ballots? Once the paper stock arrives, is it sent to the commission or is it sent to the printer?
No, it's sent to the commission.
And the commission delivers it to the printer?
Correct. Whatever, they do an estimate of how much is going to be printed that day, so they take that amount to the printer.
Once it's delivered to the printer, then the printer takes custody of it and then...
In the presence of an election official.
Okay. Is the election commission representative present throughout the printing of the ballot?
Yeah, that's what I stated
But
earlier.
how about the spoilage portion? What happens to those?
Well, those are
Spoiled
supposed to be brought back to the office, and apparently they weren't.
They were not brought back to the office. So we have established that they were not brought back to the office, the spoiled ballots or the spoiled paper. And this is the big question, I think, and a lot of people have this question in their mind. Was the Guam Election Commission ever able to reconcile the ballot stock ordered for the election with the ballot stock that was sent to the printer and the actual number of ballots that were printed? So the ballot stock that was ordered, the ballot stock actually delivered to the printer, and the ballots actually printed. Were you able to reconcile the numbers for those three areas?
I don't believe so.
Okay. How about were you able to reconcile the ballot stock ordered for the election with the ballot stock delivered to the printer and the ballot stock converted into ballots with the number of ballots actually delivered to the election precincts for election day?
The ones that are delivered to the precincts and the ones that were counted and returned, those can be reconciled.
Those can be reconciled.
Right?
But you do not know if all the ballot stock that was delivered to the printer was accounted for.
No, I don't know.
Okay, now, I guess the next logical question would be, at what point did the commission not know?
We did not find this out until I was part of the subcommittee that went over the discrepancies, and that's the time we found out.
So in other words, it was after the election when these discrepancies were identified.
Correct.
Okay.
I feel I need to swear or something, right?
I guess what I'm sort of getting at to the members of the commission is, for me, yes. Did you discover these discrepancies after the certification of the election results?
Yes.
If you had discovered these discrepancies before certifying the election, what would you have done?
Can you repeat that?
If you had discovered these discrepancies before certifying the election results, what would you have done?
Well, I think the key point, yes, admittedly there were problems, control problems at the printing press. But I think the key point is that the number of ballots, official ballots that the commission sent to the precinct and what the precinct returned back to the commission for tabulation, those are all accounted for, okay?
But that does not, Mr. Mesa, at least in my mind, erase the discrepancies that were identified. It does not. And I think, I ask the question again. Would the commission have acted the same way it did in certifying the results the way you did if you had discovered these discrepancies before the certification? I think the people of Guam deserve an answer to that question.
No, it didn't change the result.
Thank you, Dr. Guthertz,
Yes.
Senator Guthertz.
Thank you.
This commission has been very responsible, and we've done everything that we can. If we had found discrepancies If we'd found issues with the election prior to certification, then of course, by law and acting responsibly would have investigated any allegation, discrepancies, and/or issue in reference to the election and the process that took place. So, unfortunately, things were discovered afterwards. Had we discovered it prior to, then we wouldn't have acted in the manner that we did. We wouldn't have certified the results.
I appreciate the honesty in your answer. I'm asking this question because maybe there needs to be a provision in the election code that recalls an election certification. If discrepancies are discovered within 15 days, 30 days, 45 days, which basically substantiates significant questions that create doubts in the minds of the citizenry as to the legitimacy of an election, maybe it should be held again. Right now, you do not have a recall provision in this code for election certification. Am I correct? It's not in this code.
Right.
There's no mechanism. So I want to bring this to the attention of my colleagues because I think we should have a provision. If there arises, after certification of an election, substantive doubt as to the surety of having certified the election, then there should be a mechanism for further consideration and a recall of the original certification. Yes.
I believe, Senator, there is. Once the commission makes a certification, any other candidates can challenge that, and the next course is to file a suit in court. And the court, if in their opinion, after reviewing all the evidence, want to overturn it, they can.
Well, I understand that, Mr. Mesa. That is procedural due process. I understand that. But what I'm talking about is you yourselves. If you discover, oh my God, we made a mistake. Look what we found out. But you can't just sit on your hands and say, well, we're not going to do anything unless someone complains. As professionals, as people entrusted with the sacredness of an election, even after the fact, if you discover serious discrepancies, I think you have a duty to review that original action. And you need a legal mechanism to do that that's within the election law itself. So that's the point I'm trying to make. I'm not impugning anybody here, but I'm saying there are serious questions. They were discovered after the certification occurred, and things have sort of been in limbo, and doubts continue, and the subcommittee report even substantiates these matters, and I've asked questions, and you've honestly answered the questions I've asked. So I'd like to recommend to my colleagues that we need to consider a mechanism within the election code that allows for reconsideration of a certification by the election commission itself if it discovers, let's say within 60 days of reviewing the conduct of the election, that there were serious enough discrepancies to warrant such reconsideration. And I'd like to ask Mr. Chairman for legal counsel to please assist in drafting that amendment.
Okay. Thank you, Senator
Thank you.
Guthert. So we'll come back to you once your amendment's ready. Recognize Vice Speaker? Or
Thank you. I just want to follow up, and I appreciate her very good questions. But I need numbers. Unfortunately, I can't. I'm wondering, does anybody know how many, what quantity of stock was ordered and received by the Election Commission from ES&S or whoever?
Oh.
Anybody?
Number right now?
I'm a little concerned because
Yeah.
is there a reconciliation someplace? Because I want to thank you for pointing out to us how we can get onto the website to find the minutes, and I'm finding more things in the minutes as we go through with reading of the various minutes where they pointed out some of the problems. But I'm just trying to figure out, like, hypothetically, we know that we're going to get anywhere from 40 to 45,000 people voting, or 47, I think, was the registrant. So if we ordered 60,000 stock, were we able to account for 60,000 stock at the end of the process? See, what I'm trying to get to is, if you had 60,000 was ordered and received, you took 50,000 to the printer, and you kept 10,000 under lock and key at the commission, so you still had 50,000 out there. The printer printed some, and there were 200 spoiled ballots. Is there some place that says how many spoiled ballots there were? Somebody signed off and said, on day 1 there were 20, on day 2 there were 30, on day 3 there were 50, total was 200, and 3 of you signed off and said, we counted and there were 200, so there should only be 49,800 ballots out there that are going out to the precincts. But what I'm hearing from the questions that the previous senator had asked, when it was left at the printer, we don't know how much stock was left at the printer, whether or not the printer printed up a whole number of ballots. What happened to those? There may have been a reconciliation, Commissioner Mesa, and saying that yes, we were able to reconcile from all the precincts, but I know you probably think I'm very cynical, but I mean, it would seem to me that if there were 500 ballots printed at the printer and no one knew where they were at, people could vote and those could be replaced at the precincts. And you would still come out, precinct 15 sent back 2,000 ballots, but we don't know whether or not 200 of those were replaced because 200 were brought in and 200 were taken out of the boxes when they were counting. Because there was no fail-safe way of accounting for each piece of stock, which I understand from Commissioner Ruth has a special weight so that you can't find that anywhere else, and it's the only kind that will go through the counting machine. So I'm just trying to. I guess we'll have to wait until you get the number, but I'm just trying to figure out, does anybody have a guesstimate of how many are unaccounted for, so we know whether, would it be more than 100, more than 200, more than 300? What I'm trying to get to is, if there were 60,000 stock, somebody should be able to present to me a report that says, of 60, 10 were never went to the printer, so we have 10,000 clean ones. We were able to send out to the precincts, and we received back 43,000. The difference of seven. This is how many that came back that were spoiled. These are the numbers that were provisional that weren't counted. And lo and behold, at the very end, I can account for 60,000 pieces of paper.
Thank
Do you
you.
have something that does that, that says, I can account for every single one of the stock that came from the print, from ES&S?
Thank you, Honorable Senator Cruz. My understanding is our invoices would tell us how many. I cannot recollect at this point how many we ordered and how many came in. From the commission to the printer, if the processes were followed, from the commission to the printer, we should have a count of how many went to the printer and then how many was returned. If I'm not mistaken, I think there is a form that's available for that. I've not seen it, and I don't know how many.
I understand, Madam Chair, but it would seem to be a very simple question. There should have been a report that all of you have seen at one point or another in getting to the certification of this election. That report should have said, of the 60,000 stock that was received, 10 were never went to the printer, 50 went to the printer. Of the 50 that went to the printer, we can account for every single one of them. We forgot some stock at the printer, some was destroyed at the printer. How many was that? What was that number? How many were left at the printer? How many did you recover and how many were destroyed? How many came back from the precincts spoiled? And all that should all add up. And if there was a report prepared, I would hope that one of you, even in my old age, I can remember something as important as that we couldn't account for 7. We couldn't account for 70. We couldn't account for 270 or 700. None of you can remember if there was any kind of report that said we could not account for X number of stock?
I don't recall a report. I do recall discussions with regard to reconciling in our minutes, in our meetings. I don't recall seeing a report.
But no one asked to add up everything to say, this is the number and this is the number that we don't know what happened to them.
During the subcommittee meetings.
Right.
Yeah.
With all the meetings that were had between November and January or February, you mean to tell me there was no final report that said we were short 7? That's all that we lost. I mean, I can't believe that there is no such report.
Mr. Vice Speaker?
Does the SOP provide for that, Joe, for the last 40 years?
As I've stated, Vice Speaker, if the SOP was followed, we wouldn't have had this problem. And I've said that repeatedly. And as a member of the subcommittee, we were just as surprised and upset that they weren't followed, okay? And clearly, if you read the report, I don't think all the words that we used are in there. But if the procedures were followed, I mean, that's a standard operating procedure.
Yeah, but I'm just
apparently it was
saying,
followed.
when you realize that it wasn't followed, was there any attempt to try to figure out how many we were short? If it was only 7, then we can just say, oh, we can't, it wouldn't have made a difference.
To answer your question straightforward, an attempt, I understand, was made, but they could not reconcile.
But how much were they off?
I'd have to go.
Any kind of reconciliation.
I'd have to go back and look at the numbers. I don't recall right off.
Mr. Chairman, I joined in the last, the senator from Mangilao's proposal to try to have a provision in here that would allow for reconsideration.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker. And also, speaking with Executive Director, she has her staff now, since no one here can answer that question, looking into this supposed form that, that was signed to keep a tally of how many ballots were distributed and how many were not. So once that information comes in, we'll provide that to the body as well. Senator Barnes?
Just for clarification's sake, Mr. Chair, it is the responsibility for the Election Commission to give the stock that's going to be printed on to the printers, am I right? So when the stock comes in from wherever we get it from, there should be a number count on the box or on the package, am I right? And in that package, if there was 1,000 or 50,000 pieces of paper or cardstock, then is there an accounting that's done before it goes to the printer? There is? Does it get initialed off that the commission received 1,000 from the company and then it goes? Okay.
Once again, I wasn't around during the 2010 as far as involved, but based on previous experience and just speaking with Mr. Mesa, the normal process, and this is what I recall in the 12 years I was there before, is each day a certain amount of stock would go to the printer. An employee would be there, it would be printed, the employee would bring it back. If there was any rejects, it all came back each day. That's the SOP that's been in place, I think, since, well, I was there starting in '82. I believe that's still the same SOP.
So there's an accounting, right, of the issues that
There's
what
supposed,
goes over and what comes back, right?
excuse me, there's supposed to be. Now,
Oh.
if you're specifically asking about a particular election, I don't think anybody here is able to answer that question off the top of their head.
Okay,
And that's what they're saying, they have to go back and look and see what their records show.
okay.
But the general process is
That's
what it
the-
was supposed to be. It may very well not have been followed.
Okay, thank you.
Speaker Pangilinan?
But I mean, your printing won't be over a week. You're making it sound like you print 1,000 a day. Yeah,
It could be 2 or 3 days.
yeah,
The entire
just that. Okay.
Thank you.
So that's why it shouldn't be hard to account for everything, because it's not an everyday thing. You know.
Senator Respicia, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, didn't we have a hard time reconciling the ballots in the different precincts? Did your subcommittee report take that into consideration? That there were discrepancies in ballot reconciliations from the various precincts. And so if one precinct was given 100 ballots, at the end of the evening, they should have had 100 ballots, whether they were used, spoiled, or unmarked.
You're correct.
And so your report took that into consideration in the difficulty in trying to reconcile the number of ballots printed locally versus used?
No, we didn't get it. Our focus on reviewing the precinct was the accountability at the precinct. There is a form, which you call an EC-13 form, that lists the official ballots that they receive, and then at the end of the day, they turn that form back in. They note any absentee or the provisional or spoiled, and so what they receive in the morning, they must return back.
And how many people participated in the early voting?
I think there was probably about 3,400.
3,400. And so...
Correction, 37.
3,700. So there was also, if I recall, there was also an issue with securing those ballots for the 30 days that they were in the custody of the Guam Election Commission. I mean, they weren't locked up in a locked filing cabinet or even, as Commissioner Carrillo suggested, put in the bank's vault.
That's correct.
And so when the previous speakers bring up the issue about the possibility that because the plate was left at the printers unsecured and our inability to reconcile how many ballots were actually printed and how many ballot stocks we actually received, I mean, couldn't one present a theory that the printer just printed more ballots and that because those ballots weren't secured at the Guam Election Commission for those early voters, couldn't that, I mean, you understand where we're coming from, I guess is my point, right? That there's a lot of discrepancies, and it only leaves one to wonder if you keep connecting these dots, what kind of picture would actually come out with.
In a way, you're correct, Senator. I think, if this would involve probably a lot of people, and it's a conspiracy in the Senate, But I sincerely believe that did not happen.
And if there was a provision in place to undo your certification, given everything that you know about the current 2010 election, would you have moved to reconsider your certification?
Are you going to ask individually, or?
I'm just asking whoever would like to answer, because I mean, I know your stomachs are churning, because if I were in your seat, I would have thrown up a long time ago. And to say that you see all of these discrepancies occurring, and to see all these irregularities confirmed by your very report, and to just say that you can't do anything because you've certified and there's no process in going back, would you have moved to decertify or reconsider the actions of the board in certifying the current 2010 election?
I'm going to have to, this is really starting now to get into the issue of the lawsuit that's been filed. I'm not actually the counsel for that lawsuit, but I don't know that there is any provision for decertification. That's what the whole purpose of an election contest is. The court would be the
But now
part.
with that, but
I'm just saying the court would be the
Yeah.
party that decertifies. So I don't know that the members here can really answer the question, because I don't think they have the authority, as I read the code,
No,
to
and
do that.
notwithstanding what's happening in the court, I'm saying if you had the authority today, because Senator Gutherz was proposing that they be a provision to allow for that reconsideration. I'm saying if that provision was in place, would you have moved to reconsider your action? Well, that's,
Oh, sorry. I wasn't serving on a commission at the time, but given the circumstances that we're talking about now and unable to verify the amount of ballot stock, if I was serving on a commission, I would move, yes, I would move to undo our actions. However, it's a difficult thing to ask any commission to do, to undo their own work. Perhaps the body can find another. Look, the courts won't even hear the case that's in front of them, so.
well, let me ask then, do you think a provision as Senator Gutherz is proposing would be helpful going forward?
In my opinion, it would be difficult to do. I think what you might want to do is give a time frame for administrative complaints, and then maybe not certify until all those complaints are dealt with. But I mean, even that could be also a trouble. It's a difficult thing that you're asking the commission to do, because if we feel like we did our job, then why would we want to overturn our work? That's what I'm saying.
But someone can feel that way and feel like they've done their job, pat themselves on the back, but when the public comes forward and says that they felt cheated by that election because of all the allegations of fraud, do you think that you could just tell them your remedies with the court? I've done my job?
Thank you, Senator Respicio. If I were given the power and the authority to change and undo something, then I would do it. If I found that there was discrepancies, personally and professionally, after a thorough investigation, then I would undo. I would take responsibility for my actions, and I will undo what was done.
Thank you, Alice. A provision like that will be helpful going forward.
If you find in your wisdom as the lawmaker and the legislature that would give the commission greater authority to make those decisions, then by all means. I will not tell this legislature, this honorable body, to do or not do something that they may think is wise or not wise. I am not going to tell you how to do your job. In response to your question, if I was given the authority, then I will act upon it. And that's all I can say. And with regard to any type of processes, that's any types of law that you are, or you find in your wisdom, then by all means. And I ask that you keep in mind that the commission, operationally, whenever something is introduced, and I respect the desire of this body for full participation from our community. It is fantastic. It's wonderful. But keep in mind when you legislate for us to do something or address something, that you give us the tools to implement the resources so that we don't fail and we succeed.
I certainly appreciate what you're saying, Alice, and I hope the Commission recognizes that this legislature, Ms. Chairman, is not at all trying to micromanage the election process. When we passed the bill, we set up boundaries and broad parameters to which you guys should come back and let us know those kinds of things that need to be addressed. We've demonstrated that we wouldn't move unless you guys felt comfortable with something that we want to do, such as the same-day registration. Everybody would love for same-day registration to occur, but if it's impracticable, then that's probably for another time. And we didn't move on that because you've told us that it's going to be difficult. It sounds nice, but it's going to be difficult, so we didn't move on that. Now that's why we're working together to try to determine what more can be done, so we cannot experience what we experienced in the last election. But I got enough feedback, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. We'll go to Senator Yamashita, but right after that, we're going to go back on track and go through Chapter 18 and 19, and then we'll come back to all the other bookmarks that we've done. Senator Yamashita.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I just, excuse me, want to say that, we've been spending a lot of time listening. And we got all, last night in our computer, we got all the reports. And for those of us who are able to read through that, it is real clear to me that the commissioners paid attention to the discrepancies when it was brought to their attention. It's real clear to me that they've all admitted, well, the ones who have spoken have admitted that they believe they did the best that they could, and when something arrived that needed their attention, they paid attention to it. When you read the report, the honesty in those reports went from, we had workers whom, and the people being interviewed had the honesty to say, we need people, number one, who are literate, because they had some folks who weren't able to read. They had all these notions of implications for training. No, not on the Election Commission, but in the workers. If you read the interviewing, the transcripts, you had one of the workers saying, well, I wish that we had somebody who could read and write, that we don't want anyone who just can earn money or who wants to earn money. That was in the transcripts.
Mr. Taitano, you were chairman of that commission. Did you hire anybody to work in the precinct who could not read or write?
To my knowledge, Senator, I didn't personally hire them, okay? But Senator is speaking about the transcripts that she's read on the investigation that was conducted, and I can't acknowledge if the person knew how to read or not. I'm sorry.
So, and if I may, I think I had the floor.
Yeah, you have the floor. Senator Yamashita. Thank you.
So my point is this, is that as we read all of these issues, it points to that we are agreeing that there are aspects that need to be addressed. We are agreeing that training issues, enough staff, if you read the transcripts, more than one person has said they wish they had more people helping them. There were comments about how when people got sick, they had I know in Tamuning, we started with a lack of people there. I know that because I was there and I was watching some of you were there trying to make it all work. But my point is this, the issues are being identified, they're being addressed, and over again, people are acknowledging that there is room for improvement, and that's my point. I also suggest that as what has happened is now we have a new executive director. And I'm not going to ask pointedly why we have a new director, but I can almost imagine why. Because we held somebody accountable and responsible for what did not happen. And I think one of the lessons learned is that the commissioners are going to pay closer attention to what this executive director is doing and how she will hold her folks accountable for getting the work done. So, Mr. Chair, for the record, I just want to state that the facts, in the beginning I said I don't know what the problems are. And so the facts, and you gave us the reports, we're seeing what the problems are. It's a lack of process, it's a lack of training, it's a lack of focus. And now, as a previous person has raised, there's a lack of process for when something arises that we need to have another avenue perhaps to help the people who are raising the issue. So, Mr. Chair, that's all I wanted to state, is that I do believe that the issues are being aired out, and I think you are giving us an opportunity to address it. But I do believe these folks are answering the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Yamashita. We're going to go now
Mr. Chairman,
to...
This is a follow-up, but I think that's what we're doing. But I think we're also holding this board and this election commission accountable, and that's the legislature's responsibility. And so as we go through this Bill 413 page by page, I think it's certainly within our right to ask what happened and ask how we can prevent it, but more importantly, keep asking what then should the remedy be. Just because somebody couldn't follow procedures or say that they didn't have enough staff, not enough staff to even alert someone that they need stamps to mail out the absentee ballots, I mean, those things are unconscionable. Not enough staff or resources or even the basic knowledge to know that when you're told to count those ballots for the congressional race, you have to be told to count ballots for the local races as well. I mean, those are the things that we're trying to highlight, and I'll beat a dead horse until the dead horse gets up and walks again. Because it's our responsibility to convey to the community that when they voted in the 2010 election, that if that election was done wrong, that there should be a remedy. And we just cannot move forward and say, oh, we'll make sure it doesn't happen again. Several thousand voters were illegally taken off the voter registration listing because they weren't notified in writing that that's what was going to happen to them. I'm not going to sit back and say it's okay. You know, you had the staff, they had the staff resources to take those names out where they shouldn't have spent their time taking those names out when they weren't properly notified, and their own due process was violated. So be expecting me every once in a while to raise some questions and ask what happened in the past and ask how we can remedy this going forward. Not only to correct our rules and regulations, but also what is the remedy for the fact that we had a very, very different outcome when it probably should have been otherwise if this election was conducted fairly. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Respicio. We have the last two chapters, Chapter 18 and 19. Chapter 18 is the Chamorro Registry. Chapter 19 is the Guam Decolonization Registry. And as we heard from the Executive Director, no changes were made to these two chapters, but we'll still entertain any discussion, if there's any from the body at this point, for Chapter 18 or 19. If not, we'll return back to the areas that we bookmarked earlier. The first one before us is Section 16106. Speaker Ben had brought it up to us, to my attention. This is designation of measures by title. And Speaker, you are correct. It was the law that we passed was deleted. It was deleted, so I'll entertain a motion to restore it. And it should read 16106, designation of measures by title. Each measure shall be designated on the ballot by the ballot title prepared by the Election Commission. Period. That's what they have now. And what needs to be restored are the following language. The ballot title given shall begin with the last two digits of the election year, followed by the alphabet letter corresponding to the order in which it was submitted to the Election Commission. That's the one, yes. So if we can get a motion, please, Speaker.
I would move then that Section
16106.
16106 be amended to reflect the language read by the chairman.
Okay, and I'll just repeat it for the clerk's, for the purpose of the clerk. the language we need to include is the ballot title given shall begin with the last two digits of the election year, followed by the alphabet letter corresponding to the order in which it was submitted to the Election Commission. So we have a measure before us this coming election year. It will be A-12 to designate the election year.
That's my motion.
No, this is new language that was
language.
adopted by this body earlier in the year.
Passed in,
Yes.
But wasn't codified yet.
correct, and then was not part of this submittal.
Okay, well, we'll put it back. Okay, so on that motion, no objections, motion carries. Thank you, Speaker Pangilinan. We're now on Section 10114, Senator Blas. Is that the section you want to go back to? Section 10114. That's what we bookmarked earlier.
10114, what is that reference to?
Yes.
10114.
Ten 114, mailing or delivering ballots?
Yes, mailing or delivering ballots.
No,
There was
sir,
an-
that wasn't mine.
No, there was an amendment made, and you asked that we bookmark it. You had
Oh,
some,
my amendment, well, that as a result of,
as a result of us now removing the on primary election day. We can come back to it. We can.
mine was on the primary day, mine was actually on, mine was on 15201.
15-1. Okay, so we'll go back there now. We'll recognize Senator Blas on 15-1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, and this is in regards to a discussion that we had this morning, and as a result of amendment that had been passed, it basically placed the requirement, and I must say, and I'm going to, really preface by saying that I agreed and I voted for the amendment and the necessity to be able to have that time frame, that 10 days after the primary, to be able to gather all the ballots in and make the proper count. The problem is that we saw in the discussion this morning is that if you were to look at just taking into consideration what we have to deal with, theoretically 60 days when there's 60 days between the primary and the general election, that if you already you have to wait 10 days after the primary to be able to certify, and then you're going to need 45 days prior to the general to be able to make sure you mail out all the ballots to meet the UCOA, the federal guideline, UOCAVA. I just got to remember that, UOCAVA. That just gave you basically an average of about five days. Now, there was some discussion that if you were to look at the scenario today and take into consideration what's going to happen for this election, this election cycle, if I'm not mistaken, I think the numbers, and correct me if I'm wrong, Speaker, you're looking about 11 days, 12 days, 11 days somewhere in this cycle today. But, and my concern that I have is that there was a period, that basically averaged out to about 5 days. If you were to look at and take it literally, construe literally the 60-day cycle. But, and is this morning I had brought about the point where, because you've got the primary on the first Saturday of September and the general on the first Tuesday, okay, after the first Monday in November, that there may be a point in time when, you know, you have less than 5 days. Is there a time, and that I'm sure some of you are looking and doing some calculating, is there a time in the very near future, in future elections, where you're not going to have the 5 days? You're going to have actually less if we were just to leave this alone?
Senator?
Mr. Taitano?
Mr. Chair, if I may. In looking at the 2014, we actually lose 2 days. In looking at the 2014 year, we actually lose 3 days.
You lose 3 days?
Correct.
So you're not going to have 5 days, you're only going to have 2 days?
Correct.
Between the 10-day requirement and after the primary and the 45-day requirement for Uocava?
That's correct.
And that's 2 days to be able to certify the results, placement on the ballot, procurement, printing of the ballots, putting the ballots in the mail as required.
That's correct.
You know, Mr. Chair, I think therein lies, you know, an issue with regards to, you know, then again, this body is caught in you know, I don't want to say a dilemma, but with a major issue with regards to making sure that while we want to be able to satisfy the requirements and to ensure, you know, full participation in all election cycles and processes, that as a result of what we need to do in the primary, we may jeopardize what's going to happen in the general election, which would call the whole process to be moot and call into question. And we're going to be right back to square one. So I look to the body and I look to the commission with regards to some recommendation with regards to what you may think we can do to remedy the situation. Also, obviously, in the 2014 election, you know, if we were to let things go, you're only going to have 2 days to do this. And so I look to the panel there for some recommendations and some advice with regards to how we're going to, what we'd like to do to be able to resolve this.
Sidus Masi, Senator Blas, if you're going to ask me, any additional day will be very worthwhile. If we're looking at it now, I was thinking about 30 days, but I do consider the cost of campaign as well going up. So any day you give me, any additional day you give me for the prep of the primary election would be very helpful in doing the in the day-to-day operations and in the preparation of both primary and general election.
And okay, thank you, and I appreciate the concern with regards to the cost, you know, of what it costs to be for the campaign. But I think at the end of the day, it's the integrity of the vote and the voter themselves that I'm very careful. It's the end goal here. Is immediately after the votes have been tabulated in that November process, in that November election, that everything that had occurred prior to then, you know, I mean, led to something that was clean, so that you know, we did have a proper process. But I look to if there's any other suggestion or. I mean, okay, look, you know, first off, you know, the whole primary process. Obviously, the primary process is a process of which the parties themselves, correct me if I'm wrong, by definition, the parties themselves nominate those candidates to run for those positions that are up for election. That's my understanding with regards to what it is in statute, right?
That's correct, sir.
So this is basically a party function?
Yes, sir.
So if the party was to be able to complete that process, because it's supposed to be a party function, and then the November elections is basically for lack of a better term, island-wide. It's for those that are. Those are the two differences, aren't there? I mean, I know we're getting wrapped around the wheel of it as far as a primary, and then and what the government needs to do to be able to have a proper primary so it doesn't affect a general election. But is it the government's role to conduct the primary?
For now, yes.
Yes, sir. That's what the statute says.
Okay. Well, what if the statute said it was the party's role? I mean, I'm saying because here, you look at the language as it's, okay, the language says that the party, the primary, so the party can present its candidates. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, you're correct.
So is there is there a question with regards, could there be a legal question here with regards to the government infringing and doing what the party should be doing in presenting the nominations for candidates?
Senator Blas, there always could be a legal question.
I know, I saw that look on your face, Jeff.
So once again, that is clearly a political decision of this body, and I guess the parties who this body represents, as well as the people of Guam, how they want to have their nominees put forward for the general election. As Mr. Mesa pointed out earlier, many years ago, there were conventions and not a primary. So that would be up to you. So as far as would there be a legal challenge to the primary process, there could be. I mean, I assume a taxpayer, could question whether or not the tax dollars should be used to pay for it. Who knows?
And I think it's an important question because there is an amendment that I have that I will proffer later on down with regards to the conduct of the primary if we choose to continue to go down this road. But I guess the question here is, okay, if we leave things as it is, and this body's going to recognize, if we leave things as it is, don't do anything to this legislation, and it passes in 2014, you're only going to have 2 days to prepare. And we can almost already see that in 2014 you're not going to be ready, and it's not going to happen. And I'm not going to sit here and no recognizing already that at least in the 2014 election cycle that there are going to be problems because there's no way you're going to be able to do everything you need to do in 48 hours. That we're going to try to go to the next step or just let it go and just let things happen. So, so Maria, you say you're not adverse to be able to moving the primary date.
No, sir, I'm okay with moving the primary date if that's the pleasure of the legislature.
Okay. Any more suggestions for them? I mean, I'm hearing from the executive director. I'd like to be able to hear from the commission members.
Yeah.
Nope.
Senator, we're going to go on a short recess.
Thank you.
The Committee of the Whole is now back on. Senator Blas, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the recess. It gave us an opportunity to be able to discuss. And there were, Mr. Chair, recognizing the constraints well, no, I don't want to say constraints, but recognizing now the work that the commission is going to need to do to prepare not only for, primarily for the general election, and wanting to make sure that you have more time to be able to do what you need to be able to do. But recognizing there are other factors that we have to be, that go into play with regards to, that went into the discussion of I guess crafting this amendment. I'd like to make the amendment that I'm going to be making, Mr. Chair, is in section 15.201 relative to the primary date. And for the sake of not wanting to have to kill any more trees, what it would read now is that the primary shall be conducted at a polling place or places in each district on the last Saturday of August in every even number year. Moving it from the last to the last Saturday of August from the first Saturday in September gives the commission an additional 7 days automatically to be able to. Now, granted that there's still going to be some, it's going to be tight to be able to do this in some of the years, but it gives them that additional 7 days that I believe is necessary for them to be able to meet all the mandates to meet what has to be done for the general election.
Thank you, Senator Blas. On the amendment, section 15.201 is to change on line 13 after commission. On any district, on any is the as a new words. District on the last Saturday of August in every even numbered year.
Before I do that, 30-second break. 30-second recess. 30 seconds.
30-second recess. We're back on. Senator Blas, you have the floor.
Thank you. Again, the amendment proffering is to change the language so that it reads that the primary will be held on the last Saturday of August as opposed to the first Saturday in September.
Okay, thank you. On the amendment, any objections? No discussions, no objections, motion carries.
That was easy.
That was easy. Congratulations.
And now recognize
In the words of Pinko, little talk, little problem.
Senator Gutherds, you're recognized on your amendment.
Last Saturday.
I'm going to have two amendments, Mr. Chairman, but I'm going to start with this one. As you know, earlier I was concerned about the experience that the Commission had in discovering some peculiarities and problems after the election occurred. And we recognize that, and I did ask, and I was informed by attorney that there are no current provisions in the law that allows the Commission to recall a certification for further consideration and action. Chris? Yeah. And so what I've done is I've designed some language for consideration by my colleagues. And it would be a new section to 12114, which I think is a certification section in the election code. And the language would say, in the absence of judicial decision within 60 days of an election contest being filed at court, the Guam Election Commission is authorized to void already certified election results if it determines there are compelling reasons, and to certify anew upon recount, retabulation, or following an investigation of an election contest. So this is the language that I would like my colleagues to please consider. I think this is a good tool. This is a good tool for the commission. Thank you. So I ask my colleagues to please consider this, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Guthertz. On Senator Guthertz' amendment, section 12114. Senator, just to make clarification, we're looking back on section 12114. I don't know, is this the, just want to clarify, is this the correct section you want to put it in? Okay. Okay. On the amendment, Senator Blas?
Just a quick question to the commission member, probably to legal counsel. If there was a contest to election being filed in court, and let's say this happens within the 60-day time, is it advisable, and would you advise that, that commission will continue to take action knowing that there's already a proceeding that's in court? And I can appreciate that, Mr. Chair, but the concern that I've got here is it puts the commission into a legal predicament here with regards to, normally if you're going to take the action in court, the action is against the commission. And then any action the commission takes while it's in court.
Okay. All right. I have a better suggestion, and I'd like to thank my colleague for bringing this to my attention. Please remove the language, in the absence of judicial decision within 60 days of an election contest being held at court. Take that out. And just leave in the language, the Guam Election Commission is authorized to void already certified election results if it determines there are compelling reasons, and to certify anew upon recount, retabulation, or following an investigation of an election contest.
Okay.
That's better. I think that's better.
So you want to just, I believe you have to withdraw your first one and...
Yes, I would, notwithstanding my earlier motion, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer a replacement motion, and would simply take out all the language from in the absence of judicial decision within 60 days of an election contest being filed at court. Okay. But everything else would remain the same. And the point is the commission should be able to do this themselves.
Okay.
They're professional people, they're ethical people.
Chris.
If they find out after a certification that there are real problems, then they should be man enough, woman enough to acknowledge that and correct it. So this gives them the opportunity to correct it.
Thank you, Senator Guthrie. Senator Ada and then Senator Yamashita.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess if council would maybe help to clarify, but it seems that once an action has been filed in court, then we've actually lost jurisdiction of that action, and now that becomes a court action. And so, I mean, I thought that was the way the system works. Once you filed it, hands off, let that branch of government act on it and live with it.
Yeah, Senator, that was, now that Senator Guthrie has removed the first phrase, I mean, I would tend to agree just at first blush that if there's already an action filed, then the commission probably doesn't have the authority to be, because now it's in the court's hands. But by removing that first phrase,
but nonetheless,
and then moving this section to the tabulation portion of Title III, I guess just my other concern would sort of be compelling reasons. That's kind of a broad statement, but as it was first presented, that was my kind of first thought too, was the jurisdictional issue. But with that deletion, then I think it's kind of up once again to the legislature.
Boy, that would set a dangerous precedent then, that, you know, if we file an action in court and if we don't think the court is acting in a timely manner, then we just tell them, step aside. And we go in and we take over. Well, then why do we even have a court?
Is that your point of clarification?
Sorry, can I do that?
Can you get on the mic, please?
To reconsider what they did. They should be able to reconsider what they did, the election commission members, simply based upon their discovery of anomalies or questionable actions that occurred that originally they were not aware of, but so they certified the results and then later discovered all these problems. So they shouldn't have to wait for a court to tell them to do it. They should be able to do it on their own volition, based on their professional judgment.
Thank you,
Yes,
thank you, Senator.
So the court is not part of this motion anymore.
Okay, Senator Ada, are you complete? Thank you, Senator Yamashita, Senator Palacios, Senator Blas, and Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Then, related to the issue that was just raised, I think perhaps this amendment is misplaced and perhaps goes further up in this particular chapter. But my particular point that I'm raising right now, and Mr. Cook actually raised it, it was the definition of compelling reasons. I think that we need to be a little more concrete, and perhaps the compelling reasons are defined in A through F on page 88. And maybe that just needs to be reflected. But if the mover of the amendment would yield to that question, that'd be good. Thank you, Mr.
Would you yield, Senator Guthrie? Can you on the mic, please?
If it makes it clearer what the compelling reasons are, and they're already listed in the particular section that my colleague referenced, and I would not have any objections to incorporate that within the motion or to reference the motion to that section.
Thank you, Senator Guthrie. Senator Yamashita, are you, do you want to reference those sections that?
Yes.
Which are, which is?
Okay. Our compelling reasons found in section 12102, and it's A, B, C, D, E, F. These are different causes for contest. I'm thinking that's the reasons why there would be a reason to look or to investigate, or to say that there's an irregularity or something went wrong. So that, that could be a reason why the commission as a whole would say, we want to look further into this. And then if they find that there is evidence that they then can certify anew upon retabulation or following an investigation in an election contest.
So would you want to amend this amendment to incorporate that language pursuant to whatever section it is you're
Yes.
referencing?
Yes.
Okay, please, can you go ahead and... Commissioner Cruz?
Senator Guthertz, while I agree with the intent of your amendment, my problem is, what are the protections for the commission from being, what are the protections we have? I mean, even if we find evidence, it's possible that the candidate that now we reverse his certification, I mean, is there language you can put that will be held harmless as long as the evidence is deemed viable to overturn the certification? You understand what I'm saying? We need to...
I don't think that you would be in harm's way for correcting something that was wrong to begin with. If anything, I think the public would laud you for it. Who would harm you?
The candidate that just got decertified.
But under the current laws, you're already protected. So I don't think it would require any further support. You're already protected under the current laws. You get complaints all the time in elections.
Yeah, I
and you
understand.
have attorneys that take care of that, right? Guys, please listen to me. I'm trying to say there's got to be a way to correct something that was wrong if you truly find that there were significant errors or anomalies. I mean, you can't just let it ride because no one went to court. I mean, that's not
I agree with you,
ethical.
Senator. I'm not disagreeing with the intent of what I'm trying to say is I think if there could be some protection in code saying that if the violations are deemed to be viable to overturn the election, then the commission shall be held harmless, or no litigation can.
But I think we already have that in Guam law. You can ask attorney perhaps to explain that.
Jeff, if I don't.
Is that your question again?
My question for legal counsel is would this preclude us from being sued by the people we decertify? Because once certification is done, then they're certified.
Yeah.
So if we overturn a certification, we can be held liable for overturning a certification unless there's some protection in code to say that we're held harmless if we can, show cause.
But can't you also be held if you certify something that should not have been certified? I mean, someone can go to court and challenge you in court, which is happening now, I guess, right?
Well, I think that would have to be proven first.
Well,
of the so-called compelling reasons that you cited.
I think not wanting to reconsider an action that you know is wrong
Okay, we'll give
doesn't speak well of the commission.
We'll give the legal counsel the opportunity to respond.
Well, that's why I referred earlier to the fact that there already is provisions for a contest. And the court is set up to determine whether or not whatever the improprieties are that are raised in the contest rise to the level that there should be a new election or whatever. There is a specific provision already that talks about irregularity or misconduct not affecting the result. So, there's a provision that says if there's a determination that some things were done wrong, but they're not great enough to cause a difference, then it's maybe noted, but that's the end of it. So, from the commission's point of view, it's supposed to certify the results. If some party believes that the results aren't correct, then their authority is to go to court. And if the commission made a mistake, the court's going to tell it made a mistake, and it's going to go back and either have another election or it's going to recertify or whatever it's told to do by the court. It's kind of a difficult situation to put the commission basically voiding its results, because now it's put into the job of being the court. And I guess the one thing I really wanted to point out is with the deletion of the first phrase,
Precisely.
once an action was filed, as Senator Atta raised, then I believe the commission doesn't have any authority to go back and do the review unless it's ordered by the court. So it'd be up to the court to order that.
Yeah. Attorney, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you have your commissioners, very great people. They worked really hard. They did their certification in good faith. But after the fact, they discover that anomalies occurred. Now, are the commissioners just to, and no one files a complaint because nobody knows except the commission members that anomalies occurred that were discovered after the certification. So the commissioners are not going to do anything. They won't do anything. No one knows for sure something happened. Only the commissioners know. What I'm trying to say is the commissioners should have a mechanism where if they themselves discover a wrong occurred, you should be able to correct it. You should be able to correct it. And that's what this amendment intends to do, is to allow the commissioners to do that. Otherwise, taking what you just said, Attorney, would be you're putting the burden on the public to go to court and file a complaint. What if the public doesn't know what you know?
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to you, Senator, for closing. You still have the floor, Senator Yamashita.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I withdraw my amendment. But I do ask, because I've been advised that what I was defining as compelling are not compelling reasons. So, but I do ask that the mover of this amendment offer what compelling reasons are. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. On the amendment, Senator Palacios.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I listened to back and forth, and I heard about that. You know, the current law does not provide for any other remedy other than judicial review. But nothing prevents this legislature now, at this moment, to include in this update a provision that would give the authority to the Election Commission to make that decision. The same protection that's now enjoyed by the Election Commission when they reject a nominee or a candidate, or when they determine that the candidate is not eligible, the same protection should serve as the protection to defend against any challenge on the decertification. And my position is that the Election Commission has the authority to certify. It should have concurrent authority to decertify, to undo what they did mistakenly. I mean, that's common sense. And I'm not an attorney, but I'm saying that if there's not a law now for a review or for the commission to decertify, then the proposal is not to give them that law, notwithstanding that there is an avenue for a judicial review. Anybody can still go to court. But the issue here is that now there's no law, and that's not an acceptable argument, because we're here now amending the law, and we can make it law if it passes. And that's my comment.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Blas, and then Senator Respicio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I have to share the same concern with regards to sentiment with regards to the concern shared by the good senator from Tumuning with regards to the compelling reasons. And you know, there are a number of things here that, with regards to the mechanics that I believe is necessary. Other than the definition of the compelling reasons is basically, you know, when you say the Election Commission, you would think that with something like this, you would want, and as far as unanimity with regards to a decision from the Election Commission. But then also, what is concerning here is there's no timeline here. If somebody was to bring up a issue, if this thing were to be passed today, somebody's to bring, and there was an election tomorrow, somebody's to bring up an issue a year from now. There's no timeline here. So So again, I still wait to hear, and as far as, the discussion with regards to the compelling reasons, any language that would fix the mechanics necessary, in as far as, when you say commission members, are you saying a majority of them? Are you saying, all of them? What, and it goes to the concern that Mr. Carrillo has there, Commissioner Carrillo has there, and as far as I can see the position, the concern that he has with regards to this thing. This is a broad task, an awesome task, awesome authority, but give the protection and give some of the things that they fall within the bounds, how far they can react and how long they can act to certain things. So I'm going to listen to this a little bit more. Those are just some of the concerns I want to bring up. And I want to thank Commissioner Carrillo for bringing those things up, because I see the concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Respicio?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So this amendment has been amended by taking the first couple words out, in the absence of judicial decision that passed. And so, based on everything I've heard, maybe I can offer another amendment, so that the new amendment would read, as amended, the Guam Election Commission is authorized to void already certified election results if it determines by its own investigation the need to certify anew upon recount, retabulation, or following an investigation of election contest. So you would remove compelling reasons so that the matter is not subjective. And I commend Senator Guthers for bringing this issue forward, but we don't want to leave it open-ended, that a compelling reason could be, well, you're a Democrat and I'm a Republican. And for me, that's compelling enough to want to recertify you. So it could go down that far, right? Or, so I don't know if we want to entertain my suggestion, and then I can speak on behalf of the amendment as amended.
Okay, on the amendment, to the amendments, Senator, can you just repeat it, please?
The amendment will read in total, the Guam Election Commission is authorized to void already certified election results if it determines through its own investigation the need to certify anew upon recount, retabulation, or following an investigation of election contests.
Okay, on Senator Respicio's amendment to the original amendment, Vice Speaker, you reckon?
Mr. Chairman, I fully support this amendment to the amendment, because this addresses what I was talking about earlier. It's unfortunate we're discussing this 17 months after the election, all right? So I'm not trying to, I know people may want to go back, but I'm not trying to get to that. What I'm trying to get to is some of the commissioners have admitted over the last couple of days that had the SOPs been complied with to the letter that they were written, we wouldn't be in this situation. And the example with the questions that I was asking earlier, if in an attempt to reconcile the number of ballot stocks that you received, that you decided under your SOP that you had to reconcile the 60,000 ballots and what happened to them, and you go through and you say 60 and 50 were printed and you still have 10 in the boxes, and all of a sudden you find out, whoops, we can't account for 500 ballots. The difference in the election was 300. This calls the election into question. As Senator Guthrie put, the good senator from Manila put it, you have an obligation to, after making that finding that we didn't know about, and had I not known how to find it, because I kept going to your wrong website, the minutes, I would not have known about these discrepancies. You, as commission members that have been duly sworn, know about it. You should be able to, on your own, say, I want to reconsider. We do it here in this body all the time, a motion to reconsider. Procurement does it all the time where they reconsider. It doesn't have to get to the OPA. It can be aborted early and reconsidered. And all we're saying is we'd like to be able to give you guys the opportunity to, when, as the amendment puts it, when you reconcile, when you recalculate, you realize that there was an error, and you realize that the number was such that it would make a difference in the election. It wasn't just 3 ballots were missing, but hundreds of ballots were missing, and you weren't able to reconcile half the precincts. Then do something. Don't just sit with your thumb up and say, oh, well, we'll wait until the court does it, and 17 months later, we can't find a judge that's willing to hear the case, so I guess we'll wait until our grandchildren. I think, as the good Senator from Meelaw puts it, you have an obligation to reconsider it, and I think this amendment provides it, and I fully support it.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. On the amendment to the amendment, any Sure.
I just want to point out something technical here. The last portion of as amended, or following an investigation of an election contest, I foresee that as a problem, because if there's an election contest and that means it has gone to court, and there's should have been some sort of determination by the court, and I'm not sure that the body would have the authority to go back and do something after the court's already reviewed it and made a decision, whatever decision it's made. That would normally be an appeal process. So I just want to point that out. Or following an investigation of the election, something like that. Yeah, the word contest there connotates that it's, especially since it's in the section regarding election contests. I just wanted to point that out as a problem I believe would come
that's
up.
a good call, Mr. Chairman. So I move to end that sentence with the word election, so you would delete the word contest.
Okay. Yes, on the okay, yeah.
Just for clarity, I need to know if the authorization to void renders all the other certification, or is it just the one in question or the one being challenged? Or are you talking about the entire certification process? And I think that should be pointed out.
I believe it would be the office that's being challenged. In other words, if you discover anomalies in a particular action with reference to a particular position that was up for an election, then you should be able to act on that. It may not require everything.
Does that clearly tell me that, though?
Well, we can make it
Yes,
so it does.
because in the 2010 election.
Yeah, I can make offer another amendment. After the word void, it will be void any already certified. So any would just make you decide if it's this election and not the others. So I could read it again.
Yes, please.
The Guam Election Commission is authorized to void any already certified election results if it determines through its own investigation the need to certify anew upon recount, retabulation, or following an investigation of an election, period.
Okay, thank you.
Because
On the amendment,
it could be just mayoral race that the question comes up for.
Senator Blas.
Well, actually, I appreciate it, and I like the language a little bit better, but it still doesn't answer my question with regards to timelines here. You know, again, I'm bringing up the point. I mean, so you conduct an election today of the 2010 election. Is that possible as a result of this? Is there a timeline to this with regards? Is there a statute of limitations with regards to how long it can take?
Vice Speaker, would you like to?
I think because there already is an election contest and it's in court, as your counsel and all of you may all agree, that it's out of your hands at this point. But surely your SOPs tell you that within X number of days, you have to reconcile, right? I don't have your SOP in front of me, but you've assured me that had the SOPs been complied with, we wouldn't have all these major problems today. So does your SOP say that within X number of days, the staff and the must report back to the to the commission that they have a report reconciling the ballot stocks? That there's a report back that every precinct has been reconciled, and any discrepancy that may have occurred the first couple of days that were at issue, that somehow you've done an investigation, realized that the problems that existed in 5A or B or whatever other number is because they were short 4 or 7 or 9, that you've been able to reconcile it or not reconcile it. Is there a time period that you have to do that, or do you just, oh, well?
No, all of that should be done before it's certified.
All of that should be done before certification.
Right.
So this investigation should be done before certification. And if you find that there are major problems or there are issues that may make things questionable, then you're not going to certify that election. I mean,
You're correct.
so
And
that would address the time issue.
And that's occurred in the past. If there are some questions to certain precinct, it is resolved before it is certified.
But at some point before you guys certify, you should have reconciled everything.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Senator Blas, did that answer?
It doesn't answer the question. It actually just compounds the question. Because if you're doing all the investigation prior to certification and then you certify, your investigation's already done.
You're right, Senator.
Senator?
Mr. Chairman, you know, I'm thinking about this, and of course, everyone would like to put a time limit, whether it's 30 days or 60 days or whatever. But I guess I'm looking at it a little differently from an ethical perspective. When you discover something is wrong, and ethically there's a need to correct it, should you be limited by a timeline? That's a question, I mean, we all have to ask ourselves. If it's really a disservice to the people as a whole, to the voters as a whole. And I went through some of the reasons that brought me to this amendment to begin with. I said earlier, and I asked you all, and you all basically admitted that there were problems with the ballot stock. There were problems with the plate to print the ballots in terms of securing the plate properly, securing the ballot stock properly, the printing of the ballots, the spoilage from the printing of the ballots, the counting of the absentee ballots. I mean, all these things are acknowledged. And for me, I mean, I would think, I consider myself an honorable person. I would think that, gosh, all these things didn't work right. And I'm not talking about this particular election, I'm just saying in general. These things didn't work right. You know, we have a responsibility as the election commission entrusted with the faith of the people of Guam and the conduct of an election to correct something if it's not right. Now, if we put a reasonable timeline, I'll support it. But I'm trying to emphasize the ethical need to acknowledge when mistakes are made and the need to correct those mistakes. That should be the prevailing motivation for considering this amendment. Doing the right thing. But I would support a timeline. If someone wants to give me a timeline, I don't have a problem with the timeline, but remember, the issue is the ethical conduct of the election and the confidence of the voters of Guam in the results of the election.
Thank you, Senator Garthers. I think we should dispose of that amendment first. Your amendment to the amendment?
Yeah, but Mr. Chair, if I can, I think adding a timeline is why we have this problem. really, and I wanted to ask the Guam Election Commission Council that given that this matter is before the court and you have your own subcommittee report that's been adopted by the board and by motion forwarded to the Attorney General, my sense is that it just stops there. You don't know what the status is. The Attorney General has not provided an update, nor have you asked for one. And given all the anomalies and irregularities found in the 2010 election, don't you think then the Guam Election Commission should intervene in that lawsuit and file is it called an amicus brief, where you would convey to the court that by your own findings, this is what you've discovered? But that's not what's happening now. And this Guthers amendment, as amended, will make it clear that notwithstanding any court action, I mean, I think I'm not an attorney, but I think the only time you would be held in contempt is if you violate a court order, or if the court ruled one way and as a board you did another. But if you were to move on your own findings and decertify the election results, wouldn't that election matter before the court be moot? I mean, again, like what the mover of the main amendment said, it's a matter of ethics. Not to say that you're unethical, but it's just to say that you're not moving because you don't have a provision like this to allow you to address those election irregularities. But now that one is in place, and I don't support having a time limit, because, I mean, how long did it take for the Guam Election Commission to do the investigation? So maybe, Mr. Chairman, we can dispose of the amendment to the amendment, but I hope our colleagues would see that this is a remedy that we've been looking for, that can give the Guam Election Commission some statutory authority to go back and say, and like Senator Palacios brought up, we had a situation where a candidate was certified to run for the legislature, and when it was determined, because of what happened a long time ago, that candidate should have never been a member of the legislature, the Guam Election Commission took the position that, I'm sorry, we can't do anything. Make the court resolve it. Make the legislature resolve it. And so not having a provision like this will just keep us in the same situation we're in, and not have any accountability or oversight or even follow-up to whatever was discovered in any election. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment to the amendment, there was no objections. So that was to add. Senator, you want to just read your...
I'd be happy to read it again. So what I'm proposing, this amendment, the Guthers amendment, would read: the Guam Election Commission is authorized to void any already certified election results if it determines through its own investigation the need to certify anew upon recount, retabulation, or following an investigation of an election, period.
Okay. There was no objection to that amendment to the amendment, so motion carries. On the Guthers amendment? On the Guthers amendment, no? Any objections to? Okay. On the amendment to the amendment. And so we're going to dispose now of the main amendment. Yes. Any objections to the main amendment? No objections? Motion carries. We're now on Senator Dueñas' motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, at this time, I would like to propose an amendment. Mr. Chair, once again, in the research that our team has done, they find no jurisdiction in the continental U.S., the United States of America elections, that compels a primary, an independent candidate, or mandates them to participate in a party primary. So, Mr. Chair, at this time, what we've done is added a new section, 6111, to the nomination of independent candidates for the general election and set the minimum qualifications herein. And so, Mr. Chair, I'd like to enter this amendment at this time.
All right, Senator, this is on section, you're adding a new section 6111, right?
That's correct, to Chapter 6 of Title 3.
Okay.
No, you don't have copies of that.
Is there any discussion on Senator Chris Dueñas's amendment?
Yes.
And,
He has, oh yeah, only have one copy.
and Senator, you want to just maybe explain, this is what you have on your current bill?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this bill has been heard and has been reported out, Senator, by your committee. I will say that
For them?
what was not known to this body until we asked legal counsel for their opinion on section 15207, that language had already been removed. That was proposed in our original Bill 404, so that would have been irrelevant at this point because that had already been a choice within this bill as introduced. So that's already been removed. So the only remaining language within Bill 404, which I said was publicly heard, which has been reported out by your committee, was the remaining section establishing the minimum qualifications for an independent candidate to meet these requirements to advance to the general election.
Speaker Ben and then Senator Ada.
Yeah. The way I guess if I read this correctly, so this means that a voter can sign an independent candidate's petition. I'm just reading it, to send that individual straight to the general election, which then is tantamount to casting a vote for that candidate, because that's how he qualifies, is to get the signature, and so that is tantamount to a vote for that candidate, independent candidate. And then that same person who signs that petition can then come back and participate in the primary election. So that means that voter is able to vote twice in a single election. And I don't think, I guess we also got to find out whether there's any other jurisdiction in the United States that allows a voter to cast his vote twice in a single election for the same office. And so that, if the author would yield to that question, then is that because we, in the primary, we're allowing people to come in and vote, but you can only vote once, and you can only vote for one side, but you don't have to declare which side you're going to vote before going into the booth. And so that's the system that both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have stipulated to in the court order. So now we're going to allow these independent individuals who wish to vote for an independent or wish to send an independent straight to the general election to be able to send him and then come in and vote in the party primary. And I'm not sure that that's allowed in the other jurisdictions where we're saying there's no jurisdiction that requires an independent candidate to participate in the party election. I don't think it also allows those individuals that are supporting those candidates to participate in the party elections. And I think if I read this correctly, that's what this does, and I don't believe that that is what we want or what is intended to do when you yourself, as a member of a party, now basically saying, I want to be an independent because that's who I want to vote for and that's who I want to. Now you can cross over in the general election, but you shouldn't be able to be allowed. And once you sign that petition, you're voting for that guy to send him straight to the general, and you shouldn't be allowed then to participate in the party primaries. You know, so I just think that that's the effect that this has. And so I'm not sure that I can support that, if that is the effect that this proposal has. And I'll listen to the proponent.
Senator, would you yield to that question?
I mean, I would just completely disagree. I think that your ability as a registered voter to sign a petition, a nominating petition, is one of your inherent rights as a registered voter. That's why you go through the qualification process as a commission to qualify candidates. Many people who sign our petitions don't have to vote for us. So even when they sign our petitions, that's not a tantamount to a vote for us either, because they make that decision when they go into that booth. Another observation that I would make of the retiring speaker in terms of that question would be, you have the ability to cast that vote in a primary election. Even if you could sign a Democrat and a Republican's petition. That's why we also make sure that they don't sign more than 15. You can sign either one, but you could walk in and vote for whichever party you choose. So there's never an expectation or a realization of being tantamount to a vote when signing a nominating petition.
I know. So thank you very much for yielding to the question. That's correct. I agree that when you participate, when you nominate somebody, you still have to be voted on. And so you now who sign a Republican petition, you can sign that. You can sign a but in order for that individual to go to the general election, he still has to get votes. With me, if you sign a petition for a independent, he doesn't have to get any votes.
Point of information, that would be if he was running as a party. Primaries are for parties, and that's what we're determining here. So you don't have to be voted because you're not running in a primary.
But the person who now signs that independent petition is affiliating himself with that independent candidate. Right. And so therefore, should he be allowed to then come in and vote twice? That's the question. He gets to select twice because his signature is counted as the requirement to get that guy to the general election. It's his vote that is needed to count for the guy in the Democrat or the party in order to get to the election. So what gets him to the general election? On the independent candidate is a signature. On the party candidate, it's a vote. So should that person who acts to get his candidate now for that office to the general be allowed to act again by casting again and casting a vote that takes that other candidate, the party candidate now. So he gets to select twice. And I guess the question I have is, do you know if in the United States, if you go in and you vote if you're saying that the process for getting independent candidates is the petition, can that person now who signed that petition come in and vote in the primary? Do you know that?
I will go check my researchers at this point, Mr. Chair, and I'll be right back.
Yes, thank you. That's my question also.
Thank you, Speaker Ben. Any other discussion? Senator Tom Ada, and then Senator Palacios on the amendment.
I guess my question would be, the way I read this, for example, the way an independent candidate will advance to the general is all he needs is to gather up 800 signatures. And I wonder if any of the commission members could tell me how many votes did the number 16 candidate garner during this last election? Probably had to be more than several thousand.
In the primary?
Primary, sure. But since we're using the since we're using the general election, the number of number of registered voters for the last general election, then maybe we should take a look, use that then as a frame of reference. So that's one question that I have. The other question that I have is, if theoretically, a partisan candidate, the contest officially begins when they file their nomination papers and they are declared, they are certified to be an eligible nominee to run for the primary election. Yeah. And so from that point then, theoretically, the work then begins to start mustering up the support to get you through the primary and on to the general. Well, maybe for this election, it's kind of too late. But gosh, if I was going to run in the next general election, in the next election in 2014, my gosh, I'll start collecting those signatures now, one a day for the next however many days. And, come the night of the primary, I'll just turn that thing in. It just doesn't seem fair. And so so I just have a real problem with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Do you have the answer to the first question?
For the primary, the general election, I really have up to 16.
Okay, we don't have that. Yeah, what's the 15 is there, right?
Are we in recess?
No, we're just... Okay, well, we'll be in short recess. Maria, the question, the number 16? Oh, number 15.
Number, in the, you want the pri,
Switching places.
oh. Okay, I have the general. Yeah, I'll give you both. Okay. Okay. In the general election, 16,038 for Senator Mabini, 15,960 for Ray Haddock. $16,038. 16038 for Senator Mabini, 15960 for Ray Haddock. That's what they wanted. That's the general.
And then she'll give us the primary numbers.
Okay, for the primary, on the Democrat side, number 15, Jonathan Diaz, 3,646. Philip Cruz, 3,335. That's correct. For the Republican side, it's Dr. Velma Harper at 5,796, Dennis Borja at 5,351.
Okay. You're right, Senator Adel? Thank you. Senator Palacios, on the, did you have anything on the Duenas amendment? No? If not, Senator Duenas? Or any other discussion on Senator Duenas' amendment? Speaker Wanpat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you know, as I look, of course, at the amendment, and I understand, of course, where the senator is coming from, and we did try to look at other states to see whether there's any of these being practiced, and we are unable to find any. And, you know, I'm of the feeling, of course, of the belief, rather, that, you know, if this, one of two things, of course, that could be done here, is that if we're going to do this for independent candidates, then maybe the motion that, you know, I'm considering, but this is just a thought, I'm not decided yet how I'm going to do this, is to delete the word independent, and then this can be a nomination of all candidates, and they would all have, we would have a level playing field here for every candidate. But I think that there's this whole discussion in terms of why political parties, of course, have been, you know, created and established and have taken certain, you know, philosophies, missions, and goals of what it is they want to do, and they work hard at it. I mean, and there's a whole process, of course, to be able to do just that. But to have now any one group, and it can be any group, of course, you know, a Green Party, you know, whatever, a party that, whatever name we want to use it for, but not necessarily a party per se, like a Democratic Party or Republican Party, and then just have everybody run and not go through a primary and just all go into the general election. I mean, if we're going to do this for one, then I think it's only fair for others. So it's either that, or then the other is that then, I mean, gosh, 2% of the total number of registered voters, and whereas, you know, the rest who go through the primary are going to need to garner more votes as well to be able to even make it, you know, to the general election. So, I mean, where is the justice to all this in terms, and I can understand, yes, I mean, because it's getting kind of hard right now for anybody really to run. I mean, and not so much to run in a party, but to financially even run, for any position. That's getting to the point that it's becoming very difficult for anyone to run. And for me, this amendment gives somebody a greater advantage over any one of the candidates who are going to declare themselves at a particular party and run under that party banner. So, I mean, those are things that I wanted to throw out, whether we delete independent or we increase the 2% to maybe 15%. And just take, for example, when anyone wants to get an initiative going, how many votes and signatures must they garner, must they collect? We're talking about nothing less than 6,000 just to get on the ballot. And now we're going to have somebody go in there at 2%? How many? So 800 signatures to get. Oh my gosh. Maybe then I should run as an independent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Speaker Wampat. There was an objection. Any other discussion on Senator Dueñas' amendment? If there's no other, Senator Dueñas, would you like to close?
I would like to close, Mr. Chair. I would only say this, closing comments. And first of all, on the issue of the research with regard to the ability of an individual to vote, we didn't go that extensive, but I will say this. Under equal protection under the law on the 14th Amendment, I believe it's everybody's right, and the right as a registered voter to sign a petition to nominate an individual for any elected office and for any recognized party or independent. You do not discriminate, and there is no discrimination as to how many petitions you can sign, as to having to vote for that individual in which you signed their petition. I just have to say that I believe that's a moot argument. The second point I would make is I haven't heard any amendment to raise the threshold yet. The baseline of 2% and 3%, Mr. Chair, was put in there because that's what's done nationally. That is the research that was done. And that's why that number was established, and because it was established because of court cases. And the court decreed that you cannot make it burdensomely high for an independent candidate to participate in democracy. I mean, I'm a little offended, Mr. Chair, and I'm just going to say that. We've spent 3 days now discussing disenfranchisement of voters, of the electoral process. We've beat up this commission left and right. I don't even know why they would want to serve after this. And we've gone through that process, and it's fine. It's fine. It's fine for the sake
objection.
of
Objection.
I-
Objection.
There's a point of order. There's a point.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, nobody here has beat up the commission. We have been very respectful of the commission. We support the commission. We are making recommendations to the commission, and we're defining what some of the issues have been so they are not repeated again. And we're giving the commission an opportunity to find ways to be able to correct problems that have occurred in the future. That's all we've done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that, Senator.
Mr. Chair, the panel can accept how they feel. I expressed myself. That's fine. I will stand corrected on that. We've made it abundantly clear our disappointment, I guess, in the process. And in the process, I think individuals may have experienced a little stress under that. So that's the point I'll make. Anyways, I'll close with this, Mr. Chair. I really believe that absent any amendment to raise the threshold that hasn't been offered here, I'll just call for the vote, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Dueñas. On Senator Dueñas' amendment, there's been yes, there was an objection. All those in favor? Motion fails.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I
Please.
can, you had proffered to me earlier an opportunity to fix the issue with regard to the two-sided ballot. Are we going down that road?
There's an amendment that's...
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair, I appreciate it.
Okay, yes. Senator Guthertz, yes.
Yeah, for the information, my colleague, I'm working on an amendment for the ballot matter, but I also have another amendment, Mr. Chairman, and everybody should have a copy of it. And this is partly in response to some of our discussion today and some of the information we learned today with respect to the issue of the accounting of the ballot stocks, the spoiled ballots, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to offer this, and I think it's important for the future that the people of Guam actually know what happened so that we don't have the same mistakes in the future. So I'm offering this amendment. And this can be a new section to the bill that we are now considering. I will leave it to legal counsel to determine exactly where it should be placed. But it would say, inasmuch as the Guam Election Commission has acknowledged that they do not have a full accounting of the 210 general election ballot stock, within 45 days from the enactment of this act, the Guam Election Commission shall conduct an audit and reconciliation of the ballot stock ordered, printed, utilized, retained, and destroyed in the conduct of the 210 general election, and the results of the audit shall be posted on the Commission's website. That's the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Guthertz. On the motion, is there any discussion? Senator Ada?
I just have a, well, I'm a little concerned. I mean, I support the idea of going back and doing the audit and all that, but I'm concerned that here we are getting ready for the next round of elections in 2012, and this will take us up to about May, and so I don't know. Maybe the executive director can respond as to whether do you have the additional manpower resources to be able to conduct this audit and reconciliation and still be able to do all the things that you need to do to get ready for the upcoming election. Receiving, I guess, the nominating petitions and all that stuff.
With additional resources, including manpower, sir.
So in other words, that answer is that you don't have enough manpower to do this in addition to everything else that you need to get, that you need to do to prepare for the next election.
Senator Ada, in going back to the files, we can go back and look at it, go through the files and see if we have this information. And this we can probably do pretty quickly inside of the 45 days, assuming all the files are there.
Okay, well, I just want the assurance then from the Election Commission that you can carry this out in addition to your everything that you need to do to get ready for the 2012 election.
Under the assumption all the files are there. We've been compiling the files and putting them together.
Thank you, Senator Yamashita. Yes, and then Senator Yamashita.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my question, perhaps you can provide guidance to me in this. My question is it appropriate to write into statute such a specific direction? And perhaps if it is going to be made public law, that it's not, that from here on now, or to start with the 2010, that every election that the results of an audit of the ballot stock will be published. I don't think I've ever seen a law that said that it's specific to a particular incident. So I'm just posing that question.
Yes, Senator, you may amend it to include all further elections.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman?
Senator Guthrie, yes.
Yeah, the intent, this is just specific to the 210 election because that's when the anomalies occurred. And I believe it's important for us to do this to make sure that we know exactly what happened and what didn't reconcile and maybe what went wrong so that it doesn't happen again in the 212 election. So I know maybe Senator Ada had some concerns, but really this is important to do so that the commission and the election executive director can learn from this and ensure it doesn't happen again. But this is in particular for the 210 election.
Okay.
It does not say that this will apply to other elections.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? If none, yes, Speaker Juan Pat and then Senator Duenas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering that if, because this, from what I heard, that this is only for 2010 and not for any other elections, is this something then that we want to be codified for with all the rules and regulations? Or is this something that should be a standalone? I mean, not necessarily as in the chapters of this election reform, but something, separate that could be done, but not a part of the election reform. Because because you're only specifically talking about just 2010, but it's not something that's going to be carried on and practiced for all elections.
Well, I can respond to
Mr.
that.
Chairman? If I may, if we look at the intent of this legislation in front of us, it's, it was specific because of the problems that were encountered in the 2010 and prior elections. So I would say it is appropriate to entertain this at this time. Senator Duenas?
Mr. Chair, in consideration of what was mentioned earlier, I mean, we have heaped now quite a few mandates on this commission and on the staff to carry out, because that's really who's going to end up doing this. We have not added 1 ounce of resources within this bill thus far that I can remember and recall. We're now going to ask them to do this, as was mentioned by our retiring colleague from Pt.2. We have what amount of time in preparation for the 2012? Mr. Chair, I think that, going down this road and seeing that we could do this as a standalone practice, I believe, as was mentioned by the retiring speaker, and so I'm going to go ahead and object to this.
Okay, thank you. Senator Respicio?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I certainly support this amendment. I hope our memories already don't fail us. This amendment has been drafted based on the discussion that we had just this afternoon. I think in any election, you first have to take stock of how many ballots you have. How many ballots you have, and then after the election, you take stock of how many ballots you have, which should equal how many ballots were used, how many ballots were unused, and how many ballots are spoiled. This amendment is the fundamental to any election that this island or any state in this nation should have. If you believe in democracy and you believe you want to have a free and fair election, then certainly you would support this amendment. And in order to determine how best to proceed in succeeding elections, we got to build confidence in these succeeding elections by figuring out what the hell happened in the past. And to now argue that because you don't have any resources, did it really cost you a lot of money to buy stamps to send absentee ballots out? Now, don't hide behind the fact that there's not enough resources to do what you're supposed to do. And if a member of this legislature is providing that as a defense for this board, then that's unconscionable. It's unconscionable, and this dead horse that I'm beating, Mr. Chairman, has a little life in it. And it's these kinds of amendments that's gonna restore the voters' integrity in our election process. If we're gonna argue that we don't have people to run elections because maybe the policy is too stringent or cannot be followed, I believe we have very competent and talented people. But if the will and the desire is for a different outcome, then we also have very competent, talented people to do that as well. What we're doing here is to make sure that these elections are free and fair, and in order to build this confidence that we have to have in our voters, I certainly see no problem with the Guthers Amendment. I don't see any problem with the Guthers Amendment, and as the executive director testified, this information may already be available. And as a matter going forward, you better make it very clear, colleagues, that in any election going forward, you treat those ballots like you would treat cash. And if you're running a bank this way, you will not be able to celebrate the successes that the Bank of Guam is currently celebrating, where they started with $1.5 million 40 years ago, and they ended up with $1 billion in asset. Then you ask yourself why this government has $1 billion in debt. Because we keep allowing these kinds of things to happen without trying to raise the bar, without trying to hold people accountable, without trying to provide for additional transparency. And I hope and pray, Mr. Chairman, that this amendment passes and there's no objections, because an objection to this amendment would really mean that we don't want to know what happened. And we don't want to move forward and restore that credibility that we're trying so hard. Even the board has come forward and said, look, there were mistakes, and we're asking the legislature to help us tie up those loose ends so we can all move forward as a community. So I don't think the issue is lack of resources. With all due respect to my colleagues, I think the issue is we just have to face this 800-pound gorilla in the room and figure out how to not go through elections with the same problems.
Thank you, Senator Respicio. Okay, Speaker.
Mr. Chairman, when I spoke, it was primarily based on what the mover of the amendment said, that this was for 2010 and not for future elections. But the retiring speaker is where I agree with, that this practice, yes, should be done for every election. That we want to make sure that the numbers, that if we print 50,000 ballots, we want to make sure that we can account for the 50,000 ballots that were printed. But not just for this year. I like for this to be done every time. I like it to be a regular practice. That yes, when we order certain stock of paper, the same stock of paper, so that we won't have these duplicated ballots, that are just like the dollar bills. You use certain type of paper to print those, so you don't have counterfeit ballots. The same thing. You want to be able then to print them, and hopefully that it is with a printing company that you can trust, that they would not then have, extra ballots floating somewhere else. You want to also account for all the ballots that had been used, those that have been spoiled, how many then were destroyed, things of that nature. Yes, that I agree with, but not just for this one time. I like to see this, be a regular practice. That's why I said what I did earlier, primarily because I heard now two different things, but to clarify it, that's what this will be for, not just for 2010, that maybe the language could actually be changed, that instead you start with the Guam Election Commission shall conduct an audit and reconciliation of ballot stock ordered, printed, utilized, retained, and destroyed. Then the results will be placed there all the time. So that's from here on in. Well, that's a little bit, yeah.
And I would like the opportunity to clarify as well.
So maybe then in this case, actually, so it's just not for specifically this time, because I can go back and just even say even for 1984, but I'm going beyond that now. I'm talking about from here on in. So I like to amend the amendment.
Okay.
Is that,
no, we'll entertain her.
That really, when you go to line 3 where it says the Guam Election Commission, so that all those, the language before that, it would just say the Guam Election Commission, or maybe within 45 days, I don't know, maybe you can do that. Yeah, within 45 days from the enactment of this act, The Guam Election Commission shall conduct an audit and reconciliation of the ballot stock ordered, printed, utilized, retained, and destroyed, period. And that the results of the audit shall be posted on the commission's website. Oh, and then of course there's, and subsequent elections, if that's the word. From here on in is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Well, that's my amendment, so.
Okay, we're going to entertain the amendment first on the Speaker Wamfat's amendment to the amendment. Senator Gothard and the Senator.
Yeah, I just wanted an opportunity while we were doing the clarifications.
On the
Sure.
amendment to the amendment, we'll entertain that first.
I have a way to. Mr. Chairman?
Yes, on the amendment to the amendment.
On the amendment, I understand what the speaker's doing, and I think we can accommodate that. I think we can accommodate that, Madam Speaker, without really changing drastically the earlier amendment by simply adding your intent. We can add it simply on the second to the last line. It starts with conduct 210 general election, comma, and subsequent primary and general elections.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. You can't amend the amendment to the amendment.
Okay, so yes,
Well,
we're going to go.
I'm trying to point out. Okay, if you can do that, then I'll add it into this, Madam Speaker. Otherwise,
What is
you're
your,
gonna drop the
Madam
210.
Speaker?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll withdraw my amendment.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Now,
Madam
Senator
Speaker.
Gothard.
All right, so my amendment to the amendment would simply be as follows. Of the second to the last line, you have the language, conduct 210 general election, comma, period. Take away the period, put a comma, and insert and subsequent primary and general elections, period. And subsequent primary and general elections, period. The results of the audit shall be posted on the Commission's website. So that takes care of the great suggestion of the Speaker, incorporates her suggestion.
Okay, thank you, Senator Gothard. On the amendment to the amendment? No objections, motion carries. On the main amendment?
Yeah.
We have,
I would like to, clarify as well, Mr. Chair, since we didn't go with a standalone bill and exactly what I was doing when I objected, supporting my colleagues and their concerns earlier, and as the retiring speaker who discussed treating the ballots as cash and government resources, I've certainly done that throughout my tenure as being a steward of government resources. So I understand the argument. I will not hide behind budgets, but I will say, and I sure hope, in closing, that the executive director, having taken note of a considerable amount of amendments and work that we've placed on, that I would like to see when the budget time comes around, that we certainly consider giving them more resources to do the good work that they need to do to take care of free and fair elections. So with that, Mr. Chair, I withdraw my my objection.
Okay, thank you. Senator Toniata?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make an amendment to the amendment, and that's on the 45 days. I'd like to increase that from 45 to 180 days.
Okay, on the amendment to the amendment? Is there any objection?
In the event that the Election Commission doesn't have the personnel or the resources to do it or complete it within 45 days, we want to make sure that this gives them time. I mean, we're looking not just from the 2010, now we're looking forward. Let's give them that opportunity to be able to get the results, get the reconciliation, and post it up onto the website. And I think that no matter what, within 180 days, it will be posted. So.
Point of information, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The executive director of the commission already confirmed that they can do the work within 45 days. So I don't see any reason why we should extend it for up to 180 days. So I object to the amendment.
Well, the executive director did say that if the information is available, then she'll be able to get that to us. However, if this information is not available, and then they turn around and they need to do this within 45 days, and all the other work that needs to be done with this general election that's coming up, I think 180 days is reasonable.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Yamashita and then Senator Respicio. and then
Thank you,
Speaker
Mr.
Ben.
Mr. Chairman.
No, Senator Yamashita first has a,
sorry.
yes. And then,
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. With all due respect to the good senator proffering the amendment, I have to say that I believe the reason for this amendment is to ensure that there's integrity in the amount of ballots that we have. And so the 45 days will ensure that there is no question as to what happened to the ballot stock that was ordered and printed. And I think that we've spent a lot of time today talking about what happened to the ballots, spoiled or bent or rejected, or there's all kinds of categories for our ballots. And so I believe that is the reason why the 45 days actually is critical, so that foundationally we can say that what was ordered and printed has actually been accounted for. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
thank you, Senator. Speaker Wanpat and then Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to object, yes, to the 180 days, and primarily because we know that there are only 60 days between the primary and the general election. And if you remember, we had just passed the amendment and subsequent primary and general elections. So we can't then go 180 days between the primary and the general election. You can't, because it's just 60 days. Now, after the general election, of course, now, if you want to go be up to 180 days, then that's a different story. But, but for the primary, you can't. Feasibly, you can't do it, because you only have 60 days to conduct then a general election. So, and that's why I think 45 days really is reasonable, and so I object then to the 180
Thank you,
days.
Madam Speaker. Senator Respicio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to ask again, isn't this something that the Election Commission's already doing? Aren't there procedures in place for you to have a total accounting of your ballots ordered and all that stuff? And after that, you're supposed to do a reconciliation process, which eventually ends up in a reconciliation report. What the mover is asking here is that within 45 days, you can do this sooner than 45 days. If there's no discrepancies, you can do it in 4 to 5 working days. So what the mover, the amendment, is asking is that after every election, you cause yourself to provide an audit for the very report that you're doing anyway, and you share that audit with the people of Guam by putting on your website. Why are we making this difficult? Why are we making this difficult? I would move to object to the amendment to make it 180 days, and I'm almost tempted to make this 4 to 5 working days or 5 working days. But I'm copacetic to the 45 calendar days. By the way, it should be calendar days. Otherwise, if it's working days, then that's probably 90 days. But Ms. Chairman, I just want to say that based on Commissioner Mesa's testimony earlier, when the Vice Speaker was asking, this is something that's already should be done. However, in the 2010 election, it wasn't done. So originally, the mover wanted the 2010 election to be audited and posted those audit findings online. But I appreciate the Speaker's desire, and I support that, to want to make this a standard for every primary and general election, so the people know. The people know when you started your election, you had this many ballots, and when you ended your election, you still had the same number of ballots, but some were used to mark the votes, some were unmarked, and the others were spoiled.
Thank you, Senator Respicio. Speaker Pangilinan and then Senator Blas.
Thank you very much. Maybe I could just ask, I know you reconcile everything before certification, so you know how much paper you ordered, you know how many ballots you printed, and how many was spoiled. All of that gets done before certification, am I correct? it's supposed to, and in the past has happened. Right, and we may have one, the 2010, where we found discrepancies, but in the other elections, they've kind of trued up. So how would you then, what would you describe then as an audit? So just a test of, you have a box that says there's 1,000 in there, and you have another box that says there's 1,800. You have 10 boxes, and you audit and recount one box to, how would you set up that audit process? What would it be? What would it entail to audit all the reconciliation work that you've done?
I will go through the files and start with the invoices and start with the chain of custody from the time it comes in, when we received it, and that would, that I'll go to back to the files
So
and
you
then
just
come back.
match up that the invoice really says 10,000 sheets, and the printed was really 10,000 sheets, and so forth?
That's what I intend to do.
Intend to do. Okay. All right. So once again, I think the 45 days, the only issue here may be with the 2010 election ballots. Everything subsequent to that should really be all done, and then you just kind of come back within 45 days and have to test it. And that's really not that much additional work to do the audit, because it's just to verify and check specific points of the handling to make sure that they match. Just like when you audit, a company, you don't audit every single transaction. You decide you're going to take 10 transactions and test those 10 transactions, track them, and as they move through the system, they consistently appear within the system. They appear as an invoice, they appear as a payment, they appear as a deposit, and then they appear in the bank reconciliation. So that would be, that portion of that work shouldn't be that onerous and that much more demanding of the time of the commission and the resources of the commission, because you're only taking selected points and selected data, a reduced amount of data. You're not going back and recounting every single ballot again. So I just want to make that point that I don't think it's going to be that difficult. It's just the 2010 when you find that and even that, it's not going to be too difficult, because you will, as you mentioned, have a checklist of what you will be auditing and the data and tracking of the movement of that data point throughout the entire system till the time you put it away. So thank you very much, and
Thank you, Speaker. Senator Blas.
Actually, it's on the main amendment. I think Senator Ada has got something to say.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to go ahead and withdraw my amendment to the amendment.
Okay, thank you. On the amendment, on the main amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, and I thank the good speaker from Barragata with regards to some of his concerns, because I'm looking at this and I know what the intent is and everything, and I know that this is part of the process that needs to happen as part of the certification. So I don't know if necessarily this, other than to conduct the study on the 2010, I think all we're doing is regurgitating what is the normal practice before results can be certified. But that said, I'm just very cautious, and maybe legal counsel can look at this with regards to the utilization of conduct an audit and reconciliation. Is there anything that's confusing there, or with regards to what specifically is supposed to occur? Or do the board members know what when it says you conduct an audit and reconciliation? Well, the question is, that it says you shall conduct an audit and reconciliation of the ballot stock order, and so on down the line. Okay. An audit and reconciliation, it's almost synonymous. That's what I'm getting at. It's almost synonymous. I just don't want us to get wrapped around the axle with regards to what the intent is and what you want. And I think that, Mr. Chair, then I'm just going to turn it over to because I think that
Actually, an audit would be more correct.
Okay.
You may not be able to
the
reconcile.
mover of the amendment actually has an amendment.
Okay, thank you, Senator Blas. We'll have the legal counsel.
I'm sorry, just, actually, probably audit would be the better term, because we may not be able to reconcile.
Perhaps the, yeah. Well, I think maybe just a clarification. You can audit in order to reconcile. You know, maybe change the word, conduct an audit to reconcile the ballot stock order, da-da-da. Or just conduct the audit. How about take out reconcile?
Okay, would you like to, that amendment?
Yes.
To
I'd like
remove?
to remove the word reconciliation and reconciliation, the two words.
Okay, no objections? Motion carries. On the main amendment now, there was an objection, so all those, yes, on the main amendment, yes. I believe, did he object? But on the main menu,
No.
Okay, no objection, motion carries. Thank you. We're going to do one more amendment, and then we're going to recess till tomorrow. Senator Respicio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, depending on the level of objection here, I'll determine if I have to work hard or not work so hard to get this amendment approved. Oh, I moved that the last amendment that was passed, that council be authorized to codify that. Because originally, Senator Guthers just wanted for the 2010 election, and now it seems like this is going to be something that's done every primary and general election. So I move first that council be authorized to codify that amendment that we just passed.
Okay, no objections, motion
Thank you,
carries.
Mr. Chairman. Now, this amendment is specific to the 2010 election, and that it's a new section, so there's no need to codify it, and it would expire after the Guam Election Commission conducts a 2010 general election ballot review, and it's based on everything that we talked about this morning regarding the just providing an exercise of those provisional ballots that should have been counted, those absentee ballots that should have been counted, as well as determine if those additional votes would have affected those candidates that are required to have the 50% plus one as required by the Organic Act, and then to require that all of these things be posted on the Guam Election Commission website and distributed to all island media outlets. And it that has a star on it, and it's the RJ Respicio #2, and then with a star.
Okay, we don't have that up here. We don't have that, the one with the star?
Yeah.
We don't have that. Okay, yes, we
Okay,
have it now.
that's it, yeah.
So on the amendment, Senator Respicio's amendment, no objections? So ordered.
Mr. Chairman, my
Well,
amendment is easy.
Speaker, you
Yes.
want to take a break, or you want to?
No, my amendment,
take a-
because I mentioned this morning.
Okay.
And I said I'll bring it up this afternoon.
Yes.
And we had discussed this about absentee ballots, and what it is that the commission members have told us that they can also be transmitted by email, and that, of course, earlier in another amendment is that as soon as the ballots are printed and available, that they'll send them out immediately. So what this does is that in those two sections, that the absentee ballots then shall be mailed or transmitted by email to absentee voters in the manner requested within 48 hours of request or within 48 hours of certification of the ballots, whichever is later. And this was, you know, because you said you can, as soon as you get the request in an earlier amendment, that you would send them out. So then we're not saying then that the minute you get it, you send it out, but within 48 hours.
Okay.
To be able to
On
send
the WANPAT amendment on section 10106. Senator Blas?
I just got a point of order with regards to the actions of the body. An amendment this long and it would pass that quick, I didn't even have an opportunity to read it.
The chair called for any discussion or any objections to it? No, this is the one prior.
You know, Mr. Chair, I recognize and I understand. I have some grave concerns with regards to whether or not this is going to put the commission into any type of a legal bind.
Which one is that?
And I know that
We just did
the
it?
body had already moved, you already moved it as far as I'm just going to, notwithstanding the rules of the, is the motion to reconsider the actions of the body, just for the purpose of the discussion. I don't have a problem with it. I just need to make sure that the commission members aren't going to get into any legal bind to do this.
Is there a motion to reconsider?
No, you're going to have to dispose that and then go back to mine.
Okay, so on Speaker WANPAT's First Amendment on sections 10106, any objections? Which one? On 10106? Speaker one, yes. Yes, Senator Tony Ada and Senator Tom Ada.
Just a question for the commission. Does the commission have the means to transmit the ballot electronically and to keep the information secured? On the absentee ballot, to be transmitted electronically, does the commission have the means to transmit and protect the integrity of the ballot electronically?
Senator, are you talking about sending it to them or receiving it from them?
Both, when you send and receive.
Okay. I'm not worried about sending it out. I am worried about receiving it back electronically.
Did you answer your question? Yes. Yeah. Senator, is that sufficient?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Tom Ada?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe if I would ask the mover of the amendment to yield, but do we need to clarify what was meant with the within 48 hours? Is that 48 working hours? Because if the request is received, let's say at 5 p.m. on Friday, just as they're shutting down, 48 hours, they'll have to come in on, so we just need to clarify. We're talking 48 working hours? Because then that means that the request has to be responded to by Tuesday, end of Tuesday, versus Sunday night, if it was just 48 calendar hours.
Speaker, would you yield to the question?
Well, the thing is that if it was, let's say, received Friday then of course you got the weekends, that's 48 hours, then Monday, then you'll be able to send it out on Monday. So that's the 48 hours. So unless, 2 working days, yeah, that's fine with me, 2 working days, or 48 working hours. except Sundays. Okay, so Senator, would that work then if? So 48 hours except Sunday. Yes, yes, we understand. So, do you want to make that amendment, Senator, or you want me to go ahead and do it? Working hours? 48 working hours? Well, let me see. I think we should make it 48 hours except Sunday.
Is that an amendment to your amendment, Speaker?
Yes, so I'm going to just amend my amendment to put except Sunday.
Okay. On the Speaker's amendment to the amendment? No objections? Motion carries. On the main amendment? Any objections to the main amendment? No objections? Motion carries. And so we'll be in recess till 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.
It's a short one again also.
Okay, there's two to this. Section 10108.
So we
Yes.
did the 1.6, it's the same?
Same.
Yes, it's the same language.
Okay. Any objections? No objections? Motion carries. So we'll be in recess till 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.